As stated before, on even terms a player may ride off an opponent or may interpose the player's mount between an opponent and the ball, but may not ride dangerously. Rule 26B. Zigzagging in front of another player riding at a gallop is a foul. The player on the white pony takes an offside neck shot, then circles back to the ball. He hits a nearside neck shot and circles back again to the ball, fouling his opponent on the black pony, who is proceeding on the right-of-way. Zigzagging outside the right-of-way can also be a foul.
It does not have to be just strictly at the line or the ball or the right-of-way. It can be outside of that. And the players still have to relate to what is safe in their ability to get to the line.
Rule 26C. Pulling or sliding across or over a mount's fore or hind legs in such a manner as to risk tripping either mount is a foul. Here, the player in the dark jersey turns into the light player and his pony, then slides across in front to pick up the ball on the offside. Foul on dark.
Obviously, in the back, going from on the back of the horse is very dangerous for the player actually doing that, because you can cut the back legs of the horse and you can have a terrible fall. Actually, that's the most dangerous falling opponent.
Follow the player in the dark jersey as he commits two fouls. After dropping into the offside right-of-way, Dark misses a backhander, which carries him back across the line to the near side. His late attempt at a near-side play causes him to clip the hind legs of his light opponent's pony, as well as cross Light's teammate coming down the line. The dark player creates a dangerous situation for both light players, but even more so for himself. Rule 26D. Riding an opponent across or into the right-of-way of another player at an unsafe distance is a foul. Usually, the player on the outside fouls by pushing his opponent across the right-of-way. Here, the light player on the outside pushes his opponent in the dark jersey across the right-of-way of Light's teammate and spoils his offside play. Foul on the light player for dangerously riding his opponent into a light teammate.
Now, it's real important to remember which player is doing the pushing and which player is getting pushed. It's also important to notice that if the player on the outside checks off early and doesn't push him across the right-of-way, and the player on the inside goes on across on his own, then he's the one fouling.
Here, the player on the white pony fouls as he voluntarily rides across the right-of-way of the player on the black pony who is following the ball with the right-of-way. Rule 26E. Exhibiting a lack of consideration for safety on the part of a player for the player, player's mount, or for another player or mount is a foul.
If you're an umpire and you see something that's dangerous, it had to have been a foul. Why? Because there was a lack of concern on the part of safety for the people involved in it.
For instance, a player who was fouled by another player may not deliberately ride through the foul and endanger either the player or pony. In this play, the player in the light jersey crosses into the right-of-way of his opponent in the dark jersey. The opponent checks, but to guarantee a whistle, rides into the light player instead of turning off the line. Dangerous riding should not be allowed, even when a player has been fouled. Although Dark's intentions are not clear, a dangerous riding foul against him, as well as a crossing foul against Light, may be called here. Riding dangerously is a foul, even if committed, as this example demonstrates, against a teammate. Here, the player in the dark jersey commits a right-of-way foul by crossing two players on the line of the ball. The crossing foul is compounded by the dangerous riding foul, which occurs when the teammates collide.
90% of the rules are based on the right-of-way. Makes you a better player if you learn the right-of-way. However, all the rules are designed for safety.
Rule 26F. Two players of the same team riding off an opponent at the same time, whether or not it being on the right-of-way, is a foul. However, it is not necessarily a foul for a player to hook or strike an opponent's mallet while the opponent is being ridden off by a teammate of the player hooking or striking. The number 1 and number 2 players in the light jerseys foul by riding off their opponent in the dark jersey at the same time. However, by hooking in this situation, the player on the white pony does not cause danger to either his opponent or teammate.
They are allowed to have one player riding his opponent out and the other player hooking that same opponent, as long as there's no contact between the horses.
Rule 26G. Riding at an opponent in such a manner as to intimidate and cause the opponent to pull out or miss the stroke, although no entry or cross of the right-of-way actually occurs, is a foul. In this intimidation play, a light player causes his opponent to give up his right-of-way to avoid a collision. The number 4 light player and his opponent in the dark jersey are on the offside right-of-way. Light is called off by a teammate approaching from the near side at nearly 90 degrees. Although the dark player had the right-of-way, and the light player does not actually cross into that right-of-way, Light's intimidating play causes him to give it up. His opponent hesitates, then clears out to avoid a collision. Foul on the light player.
Intimidation obviously is any time that you come in to a play, are not on the line nor have the right of way, and cause a player who does have the right of way to be intimidated. And there are different degrees of intimidation, whether you cause that player to look up and not hit at the ball, or whether you cause him to avoid contact, move off the line of the ball.
In this replay of an earlier example, the player in the dark jersey denies his opponent in the light jersey free and safe access to the ball. Dark, sharp angle of approach from the near side makes it almost impossible to stay clear of his opponent's right-of-way. Although Dark manages to flatten out, his pony's head still slides across the line, preventing Light's free passage to the ball. Foul on Dark.
I think that's part of the right of way. You should have a free line and a free way for you and your horse and the ball to travel without hesitating or being intimidated by another player.
Rule 26H. Deliberately riding one's mount into the stroke of another player is a foul.
If a player has the right of way to hit the ball, and an opposing player rides into or obstructs his swing, then the opposing player has fouled.
A hit or swing is defined as the upward or downward phases of a player's stroke. Here, the player in the light jersey rides into his opponent's offside backhand stroke. Light was several strides away when his opponent began his swing, and so is responsible for riding into his opponent's shot on this play. The relative position of the hitter and defender is critical when judging who is at fault in this type of play.
To visualize it, the player coming in to make the play against him, if he's closing at the swing, if he's closing at the ball, then he's riding into the swing. If he was there when the swing started, then the player swinging has no right to hit into his legs.
Who is at fault also depends on who has the right of way. In this example of riding into a stroke, both the number 1 dark and number 4 light players enter the right of way late. Dark fouls twice. First, by entering light number 2's right of way at an unsafe distance. Second, by pushing up into light number 4's stroke. Note light number 4's position ahead of his opponent in the right of way at the point he begins his backhander. Foul on Dark. Here's another example of how important the right of way is in evaluating a riding into the stroke play. The light player's pony kicks the ball forward, placing him on the new right of way. His opponent in the dark jersey fouls by turning back into that right of way and into the light player's stroke. Ordinarily, no foul would be called in this situation where two players bump, come apart, and then swing at the ball, so long as neither player hits the other player's pony or each other. No foul here.
If player taking the back shot, player A is in this right of way, and player B is in his lane, his secondary right-of-way, right next to him, and player A takes a back shot and takes a cutaway shot, an open shot, and hits the horse in the legs when the fellow was there, that's backing into a pony.
Although a player may be established on the right-of-way, he may not hit dangerously into another player or player's mount if they were alongside when the player began his stroke. Two players ride down the right-of-way together. The player in the light jersey is obviously alongside before his opponent in the dark jersey begins his stroke, and there is no room for him to hit between horses. Foul on dark for backing into light's pony. Although the player in the light helmet is passing his opponent in the dark helmet, he is only half a horse length ahead of him when he attempts his nearside shot. A full stroke, if hit into the opponent or his pony, would be a foul. The player in the dark helmet hooks the player in the light helmet, and therefore there's no danger and no foul for illegal use of the mallet by light in this play. However, Dark's bump behind the saddle, as well as his opponent's excessive appeal following the hook, are worthy of a whistle on both players.
You see two players riding, and the player that's trying to hook the player with the ball will have his horse's head right there, almost even with the guy's lap, and be leaning out, trying to hook, boom, 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 reaching out, trying to hook his mallet. This player is obviously in the right-of-way, but because he was there, because he moved to that position early and was established in that spot, the player hitting the ball only has this play. He can only lean out and tap and try to keep the ball in front of him. He can't take a full swing.
This example illustrates the right way to make a play with an opponent alongside. The player in the light jersey taps the ball forward instead of taking a full swing, which would be a foul if it hit into his opponent's pony. Generally, this play occurs when two players bump and the one with more speed gets an opportunity to tap in front. Here we see the player in the dark jersey carrying the ball with an opponent trailing him closely. Dark continues to tap the ball while light is alongside. To avoid a hook and to avoid hitting into his opponent or opponent's horse, the dark player must take half strokes here. Riding into a back shot or neck shot is frequently misinterpreted as hitting into a player. The player in the dark jersey is a stride or two away from his ride-off when the player in the light jersey begins his hit, and makes contact as light begins the downward phase of his swing. If the player's mallet hits his opponent or his opponent's pony, as Light's does here, the foul is on the opponent for riding into the stroke.
Players come in late, hard, whatever, into the stroke, and it gets into a double kind of a foul situation there. Not only are you riding into my swing, but even if my mallet doesn't hit your horse's legs, it can be called a dangerous riding situation because you're bumping me when I'm not prepared for the bump.
Again, in this replay, note that Dark falls twice. He bumps his opponent late, causing Light's pony to momentarily lose its balance, and also rides into Light's stroke. A player who has an opponent alongside may take a neck shot, however, if he does so safely. It is not a foul for the player on the black pony to hit a neck shot while the player on the white pony is riding him off, or for the mallet to follow through into their path, provided it does not actually strike either the opponent or his mount. Ordinarily, no foul would be called against an opponent who attempts to legitimately ride off another player on the same side and at the same time, as that player is merely dribbling the ball, or for merely spoiling a player's shot by safely riding the player off on that side. The light player dribbles the ball downfield with an opponent in pursuit. The opponent rides up into Light's right-of-way between strokes and attempts an offside back shot. Although Dark could have made a cleaner play by moving Light over earlier, the fact that Light is merely dribbling the ball gives Dark the right to attempt a bump on him here. No foul on Dark.
I think when somebody's carrying the ball at either fast speed or slow speed, I think the best way to, and the most successful way to take the ball away from the guy or spoil his shot is by entering the line of the ball or the right of way at an earlier stage. You know, I think if you try to go directly to the ball, you're most likely you're going to end either fouling or missing the play totally or going totally across in front of him.
Here, the player in the dark jersey times his move accurately and moves his light opponent over between taps with a proper ride-off. No foul for the bump, but he earns one quickly thereafter for hitting into his opponent's horse.